Welcome to Revenue Unscripted, the show for B2B founders, CEOs, advisors, and leaders, where we unpack what really drives stronger revenue and margins. Not just product, not just process, but people and behaviors. I'm your host, Jennica Dixon, president of the Slattery Sales Group, and together we're going to dive into how real organizations build high-performing sales cultures, avoid costly mistakes, and turn complex deals into predictable growth. Today, I am joined by Steve Craig, VP of Sales at Solmedics, where he leads an organization serving dental practices with critical water and environmental solutions. Steve brings deep insights into A players versus B players, AVC level role clarity, and the discipline that it really takes to win over the long term. So in this conversation, we're going to dive into how nothing really sells itself, how to build a high performing sales team beyond the A players, and how to turn challenges into fuel for stronger sales performance. So Steve, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a privilege to have you here.
The privilege is all mine. I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation. So thank you for asking me.
I'm excited. So before we get into the heavy strategy, can you give listeners a quick snapshot of what you are working on today?
Currently today, I'm the vice president of sales in the central market. So we have teams that cover the full U.S. and Canada. We have everything from inside sales teams to private practice outside sales teams to DSO enterprise teams, then also surgical teams. So that kind of makes up what we do currently. Like you said, I work for a company called Solmedics. We own three other companies as well, which is Stericyl, Dry Shield, and Implant, and we're the only organization to comprehensively offer solutions for water in, through the patient, out of the dental practice.
Nice. I love that. Everybody's company is unique. I love it. It's like
Yes.
a thumbprint. Every single organization is incredibly unique in the service it provides, everything. I'm curious. I remember from our earlier conversation, you told me that you grew up around entrepreneurship and you learned early that everything has to be sold. What is perhaps a story from that time that still shapes how you lead today?
Yeah, it's probably the primary reason why I'm in sales. I mean, the two things I was looked at was sales and coaching, and I think what I do now is sales and coaching combined. But my dad was an entrepreneur, and he was driving around my two brothers and myself, and we went to probably what you would classify the nicest area in our town where the country club was at. And we were driving around and he said, "What do you think everybody here does?" And being young kids, my brothers and I thought, doctor, lawyer, dentist, those type professions that you all know about. And he actually said, no, majority of these people are salespeople, and you'd be surprised what they sell. But everything has to be sold. And I think, one thing that I've learned later in my life is, nobody wants to be sold, but they love to buy. And I think when you
Yes.
kind of keep that mindset in place, but that's what kind of started my sales journey of learning that, being a young kid and wanting to live in a neighborhood like that.
I love that. And that's deep wisdom to be shared too. Everything has to be sold. And it seems natural to those of us who grew up in entrepreneur families, but that it's not always common. That belief, it's not always common and it's sometimes overlooked. And it's
No,
interesting.
yeah, and I agree. I think a lot of those professions that I first named, a doctor, a dentist, and a lawyer. I mean, all three of those professions, I think, hate the word sales. Uh,
Yes.
but like I tell a lot of founders and owners of dental practice, which I currently work in now, it's like you have to sell all day long. You got
All
to sell
day.
yourself why you're going to get up today and go to the office in something that no one likes to go to the dentist. So you have to sell yourself of why you're going to go there. You then have to sell your teams of why they need to show up every day and why we need to treat the patients and offer that. You have to sell your patients on why they should accept treatment and why the dentist is important. Most dental practices start with a morning huddle of kind of what the day is going to look like. And we haven't even left the morning huddle yet. And you've been selling all day long. You haven't seen a patient yet. So, sales is around everything.
It really is.
I tell my kids all the time, especially when they're younger, if you want to have a good time at the party, go find the 4-year-olds and the 84-year-olds. 4-year-olds, you never know what's going to come out of their mouth, but they are the greatest sellers. And the 84-year-olds, unfortunately, they're on the back nine of their life, and they're willing to talk about regret and things they would have done differently. So you
So
can learn
true.
a lot of value from those two individuals versus the rest of the party.
Oh, I love that. I love that, man. So I'm gonna start doing that at my next parties. Because you're right. It's a 4-year-old. They'll say anything, and the 84-year-olds will too. They'll tell you what you whatever you ask. I love
What they
that.
wish they would have done differently. Yeah.
And those are the best lessons. When we're working with sales teams, we'll often tell them, especially in the wake, if they just lost a deal or something, you will often make more money from a deal that you lost and learned from than you
Hmm.
would have made if you had actually won that business. So there's a lot to be learned from what could have, should have happened.
Absolutely. It's not really what happens. It's kind of how you respond and what you do with that information.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes that's how it bounces, and it's a great lesson, and it's what we need at times.
I love that. And that resilience is such a part of selling. We have stats that show that only about 3% of the workforce is even willing to do sales. So kind of to your point from a minute ago, there are a lot of parts of the marketplace that don't quite esteem selling. And sometimes when we start working with sales teams, we'll ask the people in the room, raise your hands if your parents brought you up to be a salesperson. Like nobody raises their hands. This is this is the disappointment at Christmas profession.
Yes.
So, but I love it. I have the deepest respect for it too because I grew up with entrepreneurs who sold just like you did, and it is an art that is, I think, underestimated. So I'm curious, as you've had experience building sales teams, putting together um, players on a team, and I have to laugh sometimes. I think a lot of founders and CEOs wish that their stuff could sell itself, but there comes a point where it probably doesn't. I mean, unless you're selling on eBay with really great algorithms or something, you
Yeah.
probably have to have a human in there somewhere. And to their chagrin, they've got to put together a sales team. So I would love to pick your brain around when you hear a CEO say, we just need to hire some A players. What is the first thing that runs through your mind?
Well, I think the hiring process is probably the most important any leader founder is going to do. It's about finding the right people and getting them in the right seats in the bus. I think a lot of people overlook the whole hiring process itself, and they're looking to fill a body and get things moving fast. And a lot of times they're looking at resumes of experience and all that, but you can always train a lot of that stuff. You can teach the selling skills, you can teach the products and whatnot. You can't teach attitude, you can't teach work ethic, you can't teach grit. So I think a lot of times is looking for the right people, not a person, to fit that team. And I think the more you can do that, the better off you are. But that it's also looking at the next step of what's going to fit the team best.
Mm,
We talked a lot about that in a past conversation of most high performing championship teams, they're best when they're cohesive. And a lot of times where the cohesiveness sticks and where it comes from is having excellent B players or B plus players, however you want to call them.
yes.
The A players want all the limelight. They're probably not going to mix well with others. There are a lot of times the people you don't want to advance up into leadership. First thing you're always asking is, do they have a me or a we mindset? Because it's very hard for a leader that has a me mindset to be able to hire, coach, and develop other people and let them do it their way. One of the things I like to work with individuals when we're going through sales training and coaching and developing is, everyone wants to go ask the A player how they did it. Well, you're probably never going to sell like that A player, and you probably shouldn't. So a lot of it is, how do you walk through in your mind of what is the end result they're trying to get, and how do I do that my own style, my own way, my own verbiage, and you'll be highly successful. But getting back to the B players, I mean, that's what separates most championship teams from non-championship teams. We've seen it a lot in sports lately, where they're trying to get together the top players. You're seeing it in college now with NIL money. It's what they're doing. But you look back at the Bulls, or you look at a lot of these teams. A lot of times it was one of the B players that actually won the game, because all the attention is going to go to Michael Jordan, which is going to probably leave one or two people wide open on the floor. And if they can make that shot, and you have the right B player that can make that shot, we saw it happen in the six championships more and more times than not. And then it's having people understand what is their role in the team. A team is only as strong as their weakest link.
Yes.
So a lot of it's understanding what is my role, what is the team trajectory, what is our mission, our vision, and how do I play that? And going back to the Bulls again, a prime example is Dennis Rodman.
Right.
His job was to be defense. And in The Last Dance, the one thing that struck out with me was he said Michael Jordan was the best player in the world and he could score, but he's only going to make a shot every 50% of the time. So my job is to get the rebound and get it back to him, where he can then either get it to somebody else or do something with it. So he understood his role. It
Yeah.
wasn't to be the limelight; it was to go get rebounds and play defense.
I
And a lot
love
of
that.
people don't want to do that. And I think when you, whether it's the B players, whether it's the A players, um, a lot of it's mindset. But what they're really good at is having consistency and discipline. And what they're really good at having consistency and discipline is the basic, boring stuff. If you can get repetition in the basic, boring stuff, it comes ingrained in your mind and it just happens over time. But a lot of people want to do the fancy stuff versus what is the basic, boring stuff that is going to make you a or B outstanding B player time and time again.
I love that. Can you unpack that a little bit for, let's say, a sales organization? Because I know my brain is going in a bunch of different directions. Because I've seen some, I want to be the A player behaviors out there, and I've seen the consistency. How would you map that metaphor to roles on a sales team?
Yeah, I think a lot. Every company is different. Every sales team is different. But it's figuring out like what are your key KPIs that you're going after. What are the things that are going to make you successful, and how do you embrace that? Whether it's making one more call, whether it's really understanding, like I said before, people love to buy, but they don't like to be sold. So, are you able to uncover in the process of evaluating this customer, are they right fit for us? Is this the right customer for us? Can you walk through things of asking questions versus just trying to sell products? But I think a lot of it comes from learning what are those questions, what are the objections they're going to come up with, really starting to role play a lot of that stuff. And it's getting easier by the day because you can go on to chat GPT and build out a sales call and practice before you even got there. But a lot of people don't like to put in the practice, they just want to go do the activity. But the practice, like I said, is what gets ingrained in your muscles, in your mind memory, where you can walk through it. And you hear that from a lot of highly successful business people or highly successful athletes. They basically say after they won the game or won the deal, they basically say, "Well, I've been envisioning this time and time in my mind for the last 3 weeks. So I was already playing out exactly how this was going to happen, and now it just the mind memory took me through it." So a lot of it's having that discipline to understand that we're all like trees, we're either growing or dying. So
Yes.
you have to invest in yourself. Anything you get from an organization is fantastic, but don't rely on an organization to train and develop you. You got to develop yourself. That's the icing on the cake if you get something from them. So a lot of it's just putting in the basic practice of doing the boring things over and over again.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I love that. The planning ahead. What are their stalls going to be? And how are we going to respond? And we have I wrote a chapter in our book dedicated to handling stalls. And there's a pattern that my dad and I have noticed over the 4 decades that we've been doing this. And that is that whenever we get everybody in a room, let's say we get the whole entire sales team in a room, if the founder is still close to selling or has recently been selling, the founder's got to be there. And we ask them, we're going to help you handle every kind of pushback that you get in the marketplace. So give us everything. And we stand in front of a whiteboard with a marker and we start writing down, you're too expensive. Okay, we write that down. And then there's another one, we write that down. There's another one and we write that down. Something really magical happens around the fourth or fifth, very rarely, but occasionally the sixth. And that is every single thing that they call out after that is some version of what's already been written on the board because prospects aren't that good. They really only have a handful of moves. And if you can have a play for each of those where you know what questions you're going to ask, you know how you're going to respond, you're going to be able to extend the conversation in a way that keeps your momentum going. It's not a block. You can unlock that, but it does take a little bit of planning, a little bit of attention, and then practice. Because if you haven't practiced those questions when you are out in the marketplace and the pressure escalates and the temperature heats up, man, it's easy to lose some of those really, really strong habits. And those basic behaviors are key. And I mean, right now, the time of year that we're in, I'm thinking about goal setting. And a lot of salespeople are thinking about goal setting. And a lot of executive leaders are looking at, what are our goals for next year? And exactly what you were talking about is it, you don't just go out and close business. And I've heard CEOs tell me our value sells itself. Like we just need salespeople to get in there and close it. Like, ah, oh boy, that's really dangerous because your competitors probably know how to sell, and this is a blind spot. Um, but those behaviors, the boring behaviors of making a certain number of calls, having a certain number of conversations, moving the needle forward on those things. Everybody wants the flashy, the whining and the dining and the going golfing or whatever it might be that they think the players are doing. But it's the winners are the ones who are knocking out those behaviors. I love that. I absolutely love that. Um,
Yeah, I love that. I love the
yeah.
whiteboard exercise. One thing I've also done with teams is take that another step further because we all drink the Kool-Aid. We all think, and you should think that where you work and your products and what you're doing is the best. If you don't, you're going to have a really hard time showing the value. But a lot of times, what we also I encourage teams and I work with teams to do this is also take your biggest competitor, put their product up, the one that competes against you, and walk through the same exercise. What you're going to find out is a lot of stuff's very similar, but there are going to be one or two niche things that are going to be a little different that you could probably build value around. And like I said, if you can uncover things in the discovery process of what is their biggest problem. I know a lot of people like to talk about what keeps you up at night. I'm more excited what gets you out of bed in the morning because
Nice.
that's something you believe in, you want to run after. It's going to help your business, and if you can find things to do that, then you build a lot greater story around your value and how that can solve a solution for the individual. And I think a lot has changed in the world. We always talk about buyers are smarter, they know more, they do this, and there is a lot more at your fingertips. But in 1910, you can find it published that the Sears catalog came out, and everyone thought, well, sellers are really gonna have to change the way they do things because the Sears catalog's out, and the buyer's more informed than they ever were before. It's like you've been saying that for years.
Yes.
A
Yes.
lot of it's, can you find the discovery process? Can you find out if this is the right individual for you? And can you build a value statement around that of how you can help them change their business versus, unfortunately, most sellers going of how I'm going to change my business or have a little bit of commission breath on them. Uh,
Yes.
how am I going to be successful and win?
Yes. Oh my goodness, that is so true. And as you are talking, I'm thinking of back to the A players and the B players. We often tell our clients, because one of the things that we do with our clients is we help them find the right talent for the right seats on a sales team. And it's, we'll commonly hear the leader tell us, we really need all A players. And that's that's a different rabbit hole. But one of the things that they ask us for help in is just, making sure that we're getting really strong talent for that particular sale. They want to hire rock stars from another role, from another company. Let's say they want to go out and poach some rock stars. And so they're looking at their biggest, brightest, shiniest competitors in the marketplace and thinking, those are the salespeople I want. And we're telling them, no, 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 because you're not the biggest, brightest, shiniest. You're the upstart. You're trying to take market share. You're encroaching on their turf. You don't have that brand behind you. So if you're getting the rock star from a star logo, where they show up, like nobody's going to get fired for choosing IBM, right? But if you're trying to go up against IBM, you don't necessarily want that salesperson on your team because now you don't have all that marketing runway. You don't have all that brand awareness. You don't have all that. And when they hit the market without that, it's a very different sale. And one of the things we tell our clients is instead of going at the top, the top, let's say 3 to 5 people at your competitor, take the top guy at like the third competitor in the marketplace because that is somebody who had to really really work uphill and hustle to make it happen. So I'm thinking of the A players and the B players, like they want, maybe the number 3 guy from the top competitor, and we're like, no, 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 take the top guy from the number 3 competitor. It's not necessarily intuitive when they're looking for that. And I'm curious, when you're hiring into, I mean, you've got a complex sale, you've got a people heavy sale. When you're hiring, what traits or signals matter to you more than quota history?
Well,
You know?
I take a little different approach probably in my hiring process. I usually start off with my job today is to talk you out of the job because at face value, most jobs seem simple. We're the market leader in most of the products we sell, so it seems like it'll be simple. And I think, going back to what you just talked about, also, it's like just because somebody was successful at one place doesn't mean they're going to be successful at the next. And just because somebody maybe wasn't as successful at one doesn't mean they might be at this next one. And
Right.
once again, you see that in sellers all the time. You see it in athletes all the time. You see it in children of athletes. A lot of times you don't see them have that high success. So a lot of times, a lot of my questioning is around mindset. It's around, drive. It's a lot of that stuff that separates. I mean, that's why individuals like Michael Jordan, end up being the best because they were hungry and they wanted it. Unfortunately, they also earned a lot of money when they did that, and their kids aren't as hungry because they probably don't have to work for a living. And that's probably why they're a lot of times not as successful. No one's going to sell, not all the time, but historically, no one's going to sell as good as the founder. But can that founder train people? What is the vision? What is the product? Why did I invent this? Why did I create this? Why was I out there in the marketplace? And find really good people that you can do that. But like you said, a lot of times they're looking for the Rolodex of that salesperson. And yeah, that might get you some quick wins, but are they going to be in it for the long haul? Are they going to, be able to go past that Rolodex? Like you said, the individual that's at the number three player probably had to scrap and fight their way there. They probably have the right mindset. Obviously, they do well because they're doing what they're doing in the third spot. And you get a little bit better products around them. And, it's not 100% guarantee, but a lot of times they're going to perform extremely well.
Yes.
So, like I said, in my hiring process, a lot of it's getting down to that individual, that it factor. And I think you kind of know it when you see it.
Yeah.
But if you ask questions all around, the products you sold, and you ask questions around the past company and goal quota and all that, you're probably going to miss a lot of that. So I think if you get more into the people questions and what drives them, what ticks them, like I said, what gets them out of bed in the morning. A lot of
Right.
times sellers love to tell you what keeps them up at night because there's always something that the organization did to me. But like I said, it's can you find your way around that to be successful? There's no perfect company. There's no perfect seller. There's no perfect product. So can you find ways around that? Like I said, you should believe in what you're doing. That's also a telltale sign. If they don't believe in what they're doing and they're just in it for the money or in it for the glory or the name on the resume, it's probably not going to work out.
I love that. Is there a question or an exercise that you love that can quickly surface whether someone will fit the role?
Some of the stuff I like to ask is around, the choices they made, kind of, why they take the position they took, why they decided to leave. What's the last business book you read? What's the best podcast you've ever found? Do they have a growth mindset? Are they willing to go out and learn on their own? Are they really going to put in the work and the hustle to get there? So a lot of it is more those personal questions of why they got in the industry they're in. What's their personal vision and mission? I love to ask people, what's your personal definition of success? Because everyone's is different. But a lot of times you're going to find out, is it just money? Is it to be the number one seller? None of these things are wrong. None of these things are right. But you want to figure out what makes this person tick, and why do they do what they do. And I think, like I said, if you find that right individual that is a team player, wants to be cohesive, wants to be high performing, is willing to figure out what their role is and play that role in their team, you're going to be massively successful. And then a lot of it then is mixing in and spending a lot of time, grooming those B players. I think a lot of people think my job's to get them to be an A player. Well, they may never be an A player, but like I said, you take a B player to a B plus, they're probably going to do more than your for your organization than taking an A player to an A plus, especially for the long term. So I think a lot of it is just constantly coaching, developing, and inspiring those individuals to go out and reach greatness.
That's awesome. And as you were talking, I was thinking of a rowing team, and you've used that
Yeah.
analogy before.
Yep.
On the rowing team, uh, everybody understands their place, what they do. Everybody's rowing together, and that's it's not always the case in organizations. And I'm wondering where have you seen like really tangible results when you see a team all rowing in the same direction versus not? Do you have any tangible, like you don't obviously have to share any any names or company details or anything like that, but have you seen that play out when they're all going the same direction versus that really individual, everybody's kind of doing their own thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is, what is your goal? A lot of times in sales, it's going to be president's club. It's going to be board of directors club, however organizations, describe that. Where you see the non-cohesive teams is they're fighting to get to that spot. Most organizations and most teams have enough spots where the whole team could win as an
Right.
individual. So a cohesive team is rooting for everyone to make a spot, to help everybody share what I'm doing. What are my successes? What are my challenges? Versus you'll see a lot of A players, they don't want to share in their successes because they're fighting for that spot. And they also know they're not only competing with people nationwide outside their team, they're also competing with people on their team. A lot of times the B players are willing to share their successes, their failures, talk through those. But yeah, like you talked about on that rowing team, I mean, a lot of times you look at a rowing team, you look at the Navy SEALs team. I've been fortunate enough to hear both David Goggins and Jocko speak. That's a lot of things they talk about is a lot of it comes down to mindset, grit. Like they said, it's not always the people who are built like Jocko. I mean, that may not be the best rowing team because they're all going to be trying to go as fast as they can, which the boat might end up in circles, versus the team that gets it and gets in stride and everyone's doing their part and playing their position. Those are the teams that win. But the appearance in the very beginning sometimes always isn't what you're always looking for. Like I said, it really comes down to what's in that person's makeup, what's in their mindset, and what's in their gut, and more importantly, what's in their heart.
Wow. It's so true. I'm thinking back to an example that we give our clients when they ask for our help in building a sales team. And we use a tool to help them find that talent. And it's a simple assessment tool that was built from the ground up specifically for complex sales. And we use it because they'll often tell us, we really want a team full of A players. I'm like, okay. But that's kind of like saying, I want a team of Olympic athletes. But you kinda need to know, are we talking Olympic sumo wrestling or Olympic figure skating? Because those are gonna be different people. Like, not every Olympic athlete is who you want. And there are some times when it's wise to say no to somebody that appears to be an Olympic athlete because it's the wrong makeup, it's the wrong sport, it's the wrong physique, it's the wrong whatever. Have you seen cases, again, you don't need to share names or anything, but have you seen cases where somebody looked amazing, maybe on paper, and they had been successful, but they just didn't quite fit?
Yeah, I think you understand a leader mindset. Are they able to talk about failures? I've had a lot of people tell me they've never had a bad hire. Anyone that's telling you they've never had a bad hire is kidding themselves because everybody has.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow, yeah.
the best interviewers in the world have a bad hire every now and again, because there are really good actors out there. So
Yes.
yeah, everyone's had that case where this person looks perfect. Everything they say is perfect. You hire that individual, you get them on the team, and before you know it, that's not how it really plays out. They were just really good at saying what they wanted to do. They don't do what they say they're going to do, and you're almost wondering at the end of the day that does this person have a double mindset because this is not the person that interviewed. So a lot of times when I end my interview process, I always tell them, before I hire anyone, it's, as we walk down this journey together, am I able to have conversations with you of what I see great happening, but also see what I see negative happening? And a lot of times you're going to remind them in the interview process. I save anyone I've ever hired. I still have a file cabinet to the left of me that has everything we talked about in the interview process, the resume, and everything. Because a lot of times in annual reviews and stuff, you can go back to what you said was this is what you were hoping to accomplish in your life. This is why you wanted to take this position. This is what you're hoping to morph yourself into. Where's the disconnect? So a lot of times, you have to be able to have those challenging conversations. But you talked about complexity. I mean, the best sellers are the ones that are able to take complex situations and make them simple. So people can understand, back to the 4-year-old and the 84-year-old. You know, can you sell something to a 4-year-old? You're probably gonna be able to sell to anybody. So if you can make the complex simple, you're going to be good. But everyone's made a hiring mistake. And I think the true champion leaders playing, the infinite game, realize they can admit that, and they're comfortable with that. And,
That's so
and,
true.
and they learn to grow from that.
That is so true. And you're right. It's every once in a while we do hear somebody say, "Yeah, every hire is great," and yet they've called us because the team isn't performing. That's weird. That's when we get the phone call. And they're like, "Yep, every hire has been awesome." Do we maybe have some mismatch though in the talent? And even among those who are incredibly focused and high performing, there are just some times when it's just not a good fit. Like, they've got strengths and they were able to use those strengths in the last one or two roles that they were at, and they crushed it. And then but there's just enough of a disconnect between what their natural strengths are and what you're asking them to do, that everybody's feeling the friction. They just can't necessarily put their finger on it. It's fascinating how that misalignment can come out. And I love your idea of keeping that file of, like, reminder, like, this is what you told me, this is what you said, and coming back to that, because I've heard that one of the greatest frustrations that candidates have, candidates for I'm thinking specifically for sales positions, but I think it's probably true across the marketplace, but one of the greatest complaints that they have is the job that they thought they were getting hired into ends up not being the job that they were hired into for real. And maybe the job description had been updated for a while, whatever. And so being able to go back to, like, this is what you told me you wanted, gives them an opportunity to be like, yes. And that's not happening. Like, this isn't happening. And I thought it would. And that there's an opportunity for clarity there that I think is brilliant to keep that on hand. And
Yeah, and I
I'm
think a lot of it starts in the very beginning,
yeah.
of building out and explaining to them what is the actual position. Like I said, I start almost every interview process. My job is to talk you out of the position today. At face value, it seems very simple, but it's not. If it was simple, we wouldn't need anybody selling. It would sell itself. And then I think, when you close down the process, when you find the right person, you're going to choose your heart either way. You're either going to choose your heart by, trying to convince somebody this is the role that it's not, and then it's not going to end well, or you're going to choose the heart of telling them exactly what it's like. You might be afraid people might get up and walk away, but it's what the actual role is. So you have
Yes.
to figure that out. But then I do believe it ends with closing, asking for their permission as we walk through this journey to have difficult conversations.
Mm.
And then you can always come back to that when you're having that conversation of, we talked about this when you started. This is, I asked for your permission to have those conversations. This is what I'm seeing today. This is what I'm presenting with. Help me understand, is the story I'm telling myself the actual story or not? And get them talking, because this is what I'm seeing. So maybe the story isn't correct. Maybe there's something I'm missing. It's not to put them on defensive. It's truly caring about those individuals, and trying to make their life better. And if they feel you have that approach, they're going to run through brick walls for you. You're just doing this because you want to be number one. You want your team to be number one. You want your organization to be number one. I think the more you can build up the team around you, make them cohesive, getting them to understand that there's enough spots for President's Club for every one of us. Now, there's times where it may not be. But, if you can I've had teams where we've, gobbled up most of the spots in the President's Club rankings. Well, nobody else at the national sales meeting likes you, because you've taken up a lot of spots and they're tired of seeing your team walk up. But, in most of the scenarios
That's
that happened,
awesome.
it truly was, those individuals were probably more excited to see somebody else walk up than see themselves walk up.
That's
That's when you have
fantastic.
a cohesive, high performing team. And that's,
Wow.
you will, the ranks will be in your favor than others. But that's how you end up with a lot of rookies of the year, a lot of President's Club winners, a lot of team glory and team winners. But you have people that want to see the team win probably more than they want to see themselves win. But if you can build that, individual achievement is going to come out of that.
Love that. And that actually brings me exactly to the next question that I have highlighted here on my notes, which is, what is one practical thing that a leader could do this quarter to make roles clearer and reduce that dynamic where you might have, one person rowing like crazy and another one barely touching the water when everybody's in the boat. What's one thing that a leader could do this quarter to make those roles clearer and reduce that kind of all over the place dynamic?
Like I said, I think a lot of it is being open and transparent of what each individual player on the team's role is. And there's nothing wrong with having that conversation in front of everybody of this is your role. And in those scenarios where a lot of times you had a lot of people in that President's Club ranking, what you have to do is you have to go to the B players that did not make that list and explain to them what they did for the team to get them there, probably before you go celebrate with the A player. And then possibly down the road, you're going to talk to some of those C players of what they need to do to advance themselves up. And they might just be a C player because they were just hired 6 months ago and they weren't even eligible for President's Club and they're performing well. So a lot of it is, I think, being open and transparent and sharing this is the vision of the team. This is where we're rowing to. This is what everyone's position is on that rowing team and how we're going to get there together. And I think then you have a team that is going to help you, because if someone said, this is my role, this is what I'm going to do, and they're not doing it, you're probably going to have players on the team. Both you want not just your A players, but you also want your B players calling out somebody of this is where we were supposed to get to. This is what's happening. I'm not seeing what you're doing. And then it's not just the leader having that conversation. It's the team having that conversation. And,
Right.
there are a lot of leaders, we don't hear as much in business, but in sports, we hear a lot of it, but there are a lot of leaders like Phil Jackson or Steve Kerr, where you can see they built that team where the team is kind of leading and holding everyone accountable. And really what it comes down to is they know what their role is. They know what they're supposed to do, and they don't want to let their teammates down. Those are the teams where you're going to see high performance, high success, and you're going to see a lot of people up on stage collecting trophies because they're doing it more for their teammates than for themselves.
That's fantastic. And what you just said a minute ago, I want to kind of double click on that. You said before going and sharing the good news with the A players, going to the B players and telling them what role they had in helping the whole team get there. I think that's brilliant. That's one of the competencies. There are 21 core sales competencies that we track, and the one that there's one that we look for called Outlook, and it's basically, does this person think it's a winnable game? Because you've got to have a solid enough outlook when you get out of bed in the morning. Like your point a few minutes ago, it's not just what keeps you up at night, but what gets you out of bed in the morning. And the knowledge that it's a winnable game can change the game for a player. And I've seen very good people in dysfunctional organizations struggle because it turned into a game that wasn't. And I think what you're talking about is really just building that structure in place so that it is a winnable game
Mhm.
for everybody, not just, that rock star that seems to crush it, but perhaps if we looked at the numbers, it might be a different story. It's for everybody, it's winnable.
Yeah, absolutely. My current CEO, he said this to me in a past life over 20 years ago. I've never been given a goal I like; it's always too high, and I've never been given a comp plan I like; it's always too low. And
That's great.
where I've kind of taken that is you have to sit down with each individual. What are your goals? What do you want to accomplish this year? How can I help hold you accountable to that? How are you going to help hold yourself accountable to that? And then I always tell them, let's take the goals, let's take the comp plan, throw it out the window. What you need to do is what you just explained to me, or what you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to do. You probably need to reverse engineer based off the comp plan of what your goals actually are going to be, because you're going to have to go higher than even what the company offered you, but you have to believe you can get there. So if you create your own goal, you're going to have a lot more belief in that than a goal either I or the organization assigns to you. So let's sit down, let's figure out this is what your mission and vision is. These are the goals you hope to accomplish this year. They're not always going to be financially and a goal attainment assessment. How are we going to build out a plan to get there? And then if it is money, if it is that success of President's Club, how are we going to reverse engineer what you need to do to get there? But then where the work that's the easy part. Where the work begins is following up with that. I've had a lot of people, and then you have to know your team. You have to, bless you, you have to know the individuals you're playing and working with. Of understand that, I've had individuals where we had to have a very hard conversation. We're going into Q4, they're not where they wanted to be, and you have to look at them and basically say, these are the goals that you laid out and what you wanted to do. I don't see any way possible you can get there, because that person, that's going to drive them crazy. I've seen people in like 20th place finish in the top 10.
Whoa.
And then them say to me, the only reason why I did it was because you said that to me. You
Wow.
reminded me of what my goal was, where I was probably not getting back to the basics and performing those every day. Now, there's other people you can't say that to. You have to know your team. You have to know what is going to motivate them, what's going to drive them. Motivation gets them going, but discipline keeps them crossing the finish line. So
Right.
you have to know each team player and what are their motivators, what is going to motivate them, how are you able to communicate with them, how do they learn, how they develop. They're all different. Now, a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of leaders don't want to put in that work, because they want to
No.
manage and talk to everybody the same way. But unfortunately, anyone that has kids know you can't treat every single kid the same.
No.
And at the end of the day, I don't think you're not treating people unfairly. You're treating them different,
Yes.
and that needs to be done. And the example I always share with people is, if tomorrow is your sister's birthday, and your wife's birthday, you're probably treating them differently. It doesn't mean you don't love them the same,
Right.
but it's probably not going to be the same.
That's a
So
very good
it's
point.
the same thing. If you wake up in the morning, and unfortunately your number 101 customer calls you, and your number one customer calls you, you're not treating them unfairly, but you're going to treat them differently. You're probably calling back number one first, and you're calling back number 101 second. It's just how life works, and being comfortable with that, of saying, this is what I need to do to get to my vision, my mission, my goals, and how I'm going to accomplish it. But like I said, figuring those out is the easy part. Doing them
Right.
and consistently doing them and consistently having those check-ins, that's where the rubber meets the road, and you have to be open to that, and schedule one-on-ones with your team, be able to have them share their challenges, their successes, and you have to be open and vulnerable enough to let them know that they can share their failures with you, and we're going to talk through them. But you also have to do the same thing. You have to share the failures with them, like, hey, I thought this was the best way to go. It obviously appears it's not. We're not performing well in Q1. We need to stick with our plan, and we have to be very diligent in our goal, but we have to be flexible in how we execute that. So we made to put a little flexibility in that, to make us some slight adjustments. Doesn't mean we change the goal. It just
Right.
means we change the plan, and we allow the flow of that plan to have a little flexibility in it. So the more open and honest you are with that, the more you teach and develop them to do the same with themselves, because no one is going to probably hold you more accountable than yourself.
This is fantastic. And because you said something incredibly valuable around, I mean, there was a lot actually in there, and I hope there are many leaders listening because there's a lot there that you unpacked. What you're describing is very active management. And in full candor, one of the things that we see commonly when we come into a sales organization that might be struggling to reach its goals for growth is they took the rock star and made them a player coach, and they're still going after a quota. They're still trying to reach targets themselves. They still have a book of business to maintain and go after, but then they're still also expected to manage the team's numbers. And what we find is that, unfortunately, all too often, they end up, I mean, they go where the business needs them, which is typically to continue being the rock star salesperson. And they end up not doing exactly what you've described, which is getting into it with their team. And sometimes those teams grow, and the player coach now has way too many people on their team and they just can't effectively manage them. We've found like a sweet spot is around 6 or 7 people, like, per, let's say reps per manager. Is that what you have seen too? Does it require kind of that size in order to make these things happen? Because what you're describing is gold.
Yeah, I mean, you can't assign too much. Yeah, I would say that it fits. It's about 7 to 10 individuals. Once you get kind of above that, now there are people that can handle more. There's people that can't handle that much.
That's true.
But I
That's very
think a
true.
lot of it starts in the very beginning, like I talked about. You're really looking at leaders that have that we versus me mindset. And a lot of times, we do a very poor job in organizations of taking someone, promoting them from within, or hiring somebody from outside, and just assuming they know how to hire, they know how to train, they know how to develop people, and we never train them how to do those things. We just
Right.
hope they're going to be good at it, and we leave them out there to do that. But the other thing is, when you find the true people who have the we versus me mindset, they're comfortable and they realize I'm winning through others now. I'm not winning through myself, and I can't be the rock star. So I tell my team that all the time. We're going to go in these calls. I'm here to support you, but I'm not going to be the rock star, because if I come in and save the day and I sell the deal and I do all this, why would they ever want you to come back? They're going to want to form a relationship with me and only work with me now. Why would they want to work with you? It's like you walk in to buy a car. I mean, the first thing I do is ask for the sales manager, because I know that's where the bounce back's going to go from. So let's just
Yes.
everything out of the middle and just, where's the sales manager? Let's start working on what we're going to do here. Um, you can kind of figure those things out, but that's what you don't want. But that's how the game's been set up. That sales manager shouldn't be the rock star, shouldn't be the person doing that. But they take all the power out of those salespeople, of what they can do, what they can say, the deals they can make. It should be, unless it's really obscure and really bad for the dealership, they should allow their salespeople and empower them to do that. But they don't. And I think, in the very beginning, sellers are nervous, because they want you there to help them. But I always tell them, if you don't know the answer, I'm not going to let you fail miserably. It's going to be uncomfortable at times, because I'm not going to jump in right away. But I can guarantee you, if they ask you a question, you know the answer to, you will never not know that answer again. And that's truly how you learn. And unfortunately, if I step in right away, like most leaders do, and they give all the answers and try to close the deal, that salesperson didn't learn a thing, because instead of thinking through like what you said, all they're thinking about is, oh my gosh, I did not know the answer to that. Thank goodness this person stepped in. And before you know it, we've already moved on to 3 other things, and they didn't learn a thing because they didn't go through the process. And I think the hard thing for sellers to grasp is, you're never going to know everything. You shouldn't know everything. I don't know everything. You have to be comfortable with that, of saying, I don't know the answer to that question, but it's a great question. I want to get back to you. I think people are uncomfortable with that. But the worst thing ever is you just make something up, and they find out 2 weeks later that what you said isn't even accurate, and you have to go back to them and tell them something different. So it's all about a process. It's all about embracing the process, and it's about having that growth mindset. But that's not just for sellers. That's also for leaders. That's also for the C-suite running the organization. You can't sacrifice the people for the numbers. That's how you're going to get sellers that don't want to work for an organization or a team. And I think, we've all learned the Jack Welch ways of doing things. We're just
Yes.
firing the top 10, 20% of the people every single year.
Yep.
Well, he used to be glorified in Harvard Business Reviews. Well, he's not anymore,
Right.
because we realize it. And I think I hear from C-suites and people all the time of, explaining like, younger generations aren't loyal. They're going to job hop. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. It's like, that's been going on for years. But I said, also take off your shoes, put on their shoes, and think through. Most of those individuals you're describing have watched their parents, their aunts, their uncles, their cousins, their family members be laid off from a job so the organization can make the number, and it's sacrificing the people to make the number. And then
Yes.
you wonder why these individuals don't know what a gold watch is and they're not loyal. But if
Right.
you look at truly the way I've always looked at it, I think if you look at is your team is your number one customer,
Ooh.
that team will take care of the customers, which will take care of the communities we serve, and will
Yes.
be highly successful. I tell dentists that all the time. Your patients are not your number one customer. Your team is your number one customer. Watch how your patients interact with your team. If you take care of your team, you support them, you embrace them, you empower them, they will take care of the customer, which will take care of the communities that you serve in, and you'll be highly successful forever. But if you look at it the other way, you're going to have a revolving door with your team, which is not going to make you successful.
Oh my goodness, that is so true. And one of the things that is coming to mind as you're talking is we often work with our clients around competitive strategy. And, what is it that you actually offer the marketplace? And it's amazing how nuanced and hard to answer that question can be.
Mhm.
And like you mentioned at the beginning, and this is fantastic, kind of the whiteboard thing that you do, where, what is it that you're bringing to the marketplace? We do something very similar where we ask them, what tell us about your value prop. Tell us about your unique differentiators. And they start naming all these amazing things. And we're great at this, we're great at this, we're great at this. And we're like, okay. So we make the list and we're like, that's a great list. Now, if you had to leave this company and go work for your next competitor, how many of these things would you have to change? And they're like, oh, darn. Like, this is okay. So we're going to strike everything off this list that is shared between you and your competitors, because once something is shared between competitors, it's a commodity and we're going to lowest price. So if you want to protect your margins, you don't talk about wonderful service, great people, high quality. Those are the things that your competitors are saying too. So that's commodity status. And what often comes out of those sessions, and it could take many hours with the executive team, what are you actually bringing to the marketplace? It's not always hard to answer. I'm sorry, it's sometimes harder to answer than they expect. They always want, every leader wants something that's truly unique, right? Like we all want patented technology. We all want the thing that is so unique, nobody else can do it. And in fact, I remember a CRO talking to me once and saying, don't even talk to my team about competitive strategy because we don't have any competitors in the marketplace. May they rest in peace. They are no longer with us. Perspective on what it is that makes them unique or different or better. They often underestimate how important the people in the process are to it. And it's not just empathy that's causing us to say that the people are the important piece. It's the fact that when you look at your real differentiation, like your competitive differentiation in the marketplace, it's probably not something coldly unique like patented technology, because that's
Mhm.
extremely rare and it tends to be very short lived. The real competitive advantage tends to be buried in your business model, how you do what you do, how you're set up to deliver what it is that you deliver. And that requires people. And that's where fire the 10%, man. You got to be really careful with coming in and trimming things because you can inadvertently cut too deep.
Absolutely, and I think the people that say we don't have competitors, everybody has competitors. You may
Right.
not have a direct competitor, but like I tell dentists all the time, your competition is not the dentist down the street. It's Disney World. It's the new Apple phone. That's your competitor.
Yes.
People are they're gonna spend money, but do they see the value in spending money here? Because there's a lot of people that say I can't afford that, but then they just tell you about the trip to Disney. They tell you about the new iPhone they just got and how it's changed their life, which means they had money. They have money for what they want to do.
Yes.
And I've always, like I said, I do the same whiteboard thing. And a lot of times, after we kind of walk through that painstaking process you described, like I said, a lot of times put up the competitor. What do we have differentiated that the competitor doesn't have? And usually it's the exact same list. And like you talked about, the thing that it usually comes down to at the end of the day, not always, most of the majority of the time, it's going to come down to, are you easy to work with and are you easy to buy from? Because a lot of times we get in our own way of not being easy to work with and not being easy to buy from. And a
Yes.
lot of times it's we're trying to follow a policy. And a lot of times, you're on the phone, you're trying to make an appointment, you're trying to do something with insurance, any type of thing. And you can tell that person's just following the policy. And a lot of times it's like, you got to empower people to have a little more sense. Same thing. I was able to listen to a couple talks from different times from different like high up individuals at the Ritz Carlton. Like they said, there's a certain dollar level, and it's probably more than most companies are comfortable with. I don't remember the exact number, but it's like below like $2,000. That employee, including the person sweeping up the pool, is allowed to do something for that customer inside that dollar value. That's truly empowering your people, and that's why people always talk about the experience at a Ritz Carlton is different than a Marriott. The hotel structure is the same, the business model is the same, everything's the same. It's just the feel you leave with or the feel you embrace while you're there, it is different. And you can see it even at the smaller hotels. Of you'll walk by someone, they look down. It's like you don't have to look down. I mean, what you're doing is very important. And
Yes.
I always, whether I'm at the airport, whether I'm at a hotel, anywhere, I always think, the custodians that are inside clean the bathroom, because what would that
Yes.
like if they didn't do that. But a
Amen.
lot of it, the more you give, the more you'll get in the world.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times you have to get over yourself and realize
Yes.
that everybody has some struggles. Everybody's trying to do better. But the more you can turn around, reach your hand back up and help others, the better off you're going to be, and the better off you're going to live. And like I said, it's not really what happens to you; it's just how you react to what happens to you.
Love that. Now, I want to make sure I honor your calendar here, and I want to make sure I land the plane because I could keep asking you questions for hours. This is phenomenal insights that you are bringing. Thank you so much. If there was, let's say, one thing that you could tell an executive who's maybe listening and saying, "I think I've been chasing the wrong kind of A player," what what is the first move you would tell them to make when they go back to their team?
I would tell them to assess their team and kind of see where the team's at, where the performance at, where the individuals as individuals are at, and realize be open, be flexible to let people do it their way, and then be open to, like I said, find out what makes this person tick on the team. You can always train sales skills. You can always train someone how to have product knowledge, but nine times out of 10, if you can just get them in their car and get the car facing the right way out of the driveway and get them out and doing their work and get them to embrace doing the basics over and over again, you will see a lot of people outperform people with a lot more talent. If you can find that right person. And what happens is when you gather teams like that and you make them cohesive, high performance just happens because everybody wants to see others perform. So a lot of it is you have to take the assessment of your team. Do I have the right people on the bus? And maybe there is in the wrong seat. Maybe they'd be highly successful somewhere else. There are times when you, unfortunately, you're going to have to help someone seek excellence elsewhere. But that is part of a thriving company and realizing, the way we've always done it is the killer of every business. So just because this is the way we've always done it, there are times, like I said, you want to be very diligent on what your goals are, but you want to be very flexible in the execution. There are times when we need to pivot and do things. No one saw a pandemic coming. There's a lot of things people don't see coming. You have to be flexible in the way you do things. The world is changing. I'm a huge believer in it's no longer who you know, it's who knows you. So, a lot of times we don't ask our great B players, who are people you know. Ask the great A players, who are people you know. And I think a lot of times you're going to find great people through that network of other people, especially if someone's willing to, recommend somebody to a team that's high performing. You probably assume that person's pretty good or they wouldn't be recommending them. I don't think if someone's going to recommend someone so I can get to the number one spot because I've been in number two my whole time. Most people want to see the team perform, but a lot of it is giving up some of that control and realizing you got to let the team flow. You got to let them be them. And as long as we're being flexible, but still going after that main goal that we've set for ourselves, we will be highly successful.
Wow, I love that. Hard goals, flexible execution. That's those are easy to get mixed up.
And it can be for leaders, and especially in the C-suite, it can be scary.
Yes,
Because a lot of
yes.
times we think this is the way it worked for me, so it has to work this way. Well, that might work for some, it's not gonna work for all. So you have to realize that some people might do things a little bit differently. I had a leader one time say to me, "Call averages, I don't really believe in them. I don't know how good you are. You might be able to make 2 calls and win President's Club. You might need to make 50 calls. You might need to work nights and weekends. I don't know how good you are." And a lot of that is putting the mindset into them of you gotta put in the work. You got to assess where you're at, what is working, what is not working, and can you self correct? If you can self correct and be self disciplined and own your own life, things are going to work well. But when you try to do it someone else's way, it doesn't come off genuine, doesn't come off authentic.
You're right. And you're the second leader that I've had say that in the last few days. And it's wisdom. It's not always easy to carry out, but it is wisdom because it's scary to let people
It
do
is
their
scary.
own way. But
It is
man,
scary. It's not the way you did it. So it can be scary.
yeah. I love that. Steve, thank you so much for being willing to share your insights here. Man, we covered a lot of ground from sports and A players and B players
We
all the
did, we
way
did.
to competitive strategy and I think a little bit of everything in between. Thank you so much for your time today. This is incredibly valuable and I deeply appreciate you sharing your insights with us.
I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate having the conversation. If you want a part two anytime, just let me know.
Yes.
It was a great conversation, and hopefully it helps a lot of people, both on the sales side and both on the leadership side. Like I said,
Awesome.
once you kind of realize you're on the back nine, it's all about helping others. And like I said, the more you give, the more you're going to get.
I love that. When I turned 40, my teenager basically wished me a happy birthday by saying, "Well, it's always easier going downhill." So it's like,
You just
thanks.
got to embrace it. We're heading downhill, and we're going for it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's easier on the way down, apparently. So
Yeah, the way I've always looked at it is it's all about the dash on the tombstone. It's not about the date, the front and the back. It's about the journey in the middle, and you got to embrace, enjoy it.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to share so much with us. And yes, I am already looking forward to part two. So
Awesome.
thank
I
you.
appreciate your time and I appreciate the conversation.
Awesome. We will see you again soon.
Thank you.